From Johnson and Diesel putting an end to their beef to bringing the whole saga to a full circle. Here's how Dwayne Johnson's return to the Fast and Furious franchise changes everything. Yup, you heard me right. The Rock's making a return to the strongest family in cinematic history. The man graced us with his presence in the post-credits scene of the latest flick, Fast X, which has left a lot of people confused. Just like any real family, there was a huge drama between Johnson and Mr. Family, Vin Diesel himself, and the wrestling legend was dead set against returning to the series. Back in November 2021, Diesel hopped on the gram begging Johnson to come back. But Dwayne wasn't having any of it, revealing in an interview that he'd already told Diesel he was out, wrapping up by saying that he'd still support the cast and cheer for the franchise's success though. But here's where it gets spicy. Diesel, being the master of manipulation, took matters public. He made a post on social media mentioning how his own kids missed him, and even brought up Paul Walker's tragic passing to try and guilt The Rock into joining back. Obviously, that didn't work. Instead, Dwayne got really pissed, and he made it clear that he didn't appreciate the manipulation. But hey, all's well that ends well, right? This unexpected twist in the Diesel vs. Johnson saga shows that they've put their differences aside, for now at least. But let's face it, the franchise just isn't the same without The Rock. As for Diesel, this truce shows that he's willing to bury the hatchet, as long as it means keeping the franchise alive and kicking. But hey, now that Johnson's back, what can we expect from the series? For starters, expect a whole lot of cheddar. This is gonna be huge for the box office. I know the Fast franchise is already massive at the box office, but with Johnson's star power in the mix, it's about to reach a whole new level of awesomeness. Let me give you a little perspective. Fast 5, Johnson's first appearance in the franchise, raked in a whopping $626 million worldwide. A serious boost from 2009's Fast and Furious's $360 million. And that's not all. Because Fast and Furious 6 brought in a mind-blowing $788 million at the box office. Plus, two of the highest-grossing films in the series that crossed the billion-dollar mark, Furious 7 and The Fate of the Furious, also featured Johnson's Luke Hobbs. These numbers speak for themselves. The Rock knows how to bring in the crowds and pack a punch at the box office. Aside from the money part of the equation, Johnson's involvement's good for the story as well. Hobbs has always brought something unique to the table in the Fast films. Whether he was an antagonist causing trouble or a loyal friend lending a hand, he always added that extra spice that made the movies truly stand out. And the best films in the series always had The Rock right in the thick of things. Take Fast 5, for example. Hobbs burst onto the scene and completely stole the show, bringing a whole new kind of adversary that the family had never faced before. The inclusion of The Rock in the family also signaled a turning point in the franchise, marking the saga's transition from humble car flicks to full-blown action-packed blockbusters. And let me tell you, the tension between Hobbs and Dom, it was a ticking time bomb ready to explode any time. That tension would eventually set the stage for The Fate of the Furious, where Hobbs found himself chasing Dom again, probably trying to arrest him for breaking the laws of physics in every one of his films. But even when you don't consider the hype, Johnson's inclusion in the finale also means that he plays an important role in it. You think The Rock would pop in for just a tiny little tease? Nope. Our man Dwayne's got something big up his sleeves, and it's not his biceps. You can bet that Hobbs is going to play a major role in the grand finale of the franchise. Originally, Fast X Part 2 was set to be the grand finale, but Diesel recently teased the possibility of a 12th film being the actual ending. Yep, they might just keep the pedal to the metal for one more go. If Fast and Furious 12 does become a reality, that'd mean that Hobbs will be back for not just one, but two more movies. So our man Dwayne's in it for the long haul, and I couldn't be more excited. But it doesn't stop at the main storyline films either, because his return could help make Hobbs and Shaw 2 a reality. Aside from grossing $760 million on a $200 million budget, Hobbs and Shaw was a solid start for a potential series of Fast spin-offs. With two of the biggest action stars in the business, Jason Statham and Johnson teaming up, it had all the ingredients for an action-packed blowout. This is why it was a shock that Hobbs and Shaw 2 never hit the scene. But now, with both The Rock and Statham making a comeback in Fast X, the odds of a sequel happening just got a whole lot better. Besides, Fast X already showed us Shaw embarking on a daring solo mission, saving his dear old mum from the wicked Dante Reyes, played by the incredible Jason Momoa. Now, if that isn't the perfect setup for Hobbs in Shaw 2, then I don't know what is. Besides, I'm sure all of us can agree that Johnson can't exactly create franchises of his own. Despite being in a whole bunch of movies since his last appearance in The Fate of the Furious, none of them managed to launch a franchise as massive as The Fast and Furious, even though some had the biggest names in Hollywood attached to them, such as Red Notice with Gal Gadot and Ryan Reynolds in it. Plus, aside from the Jumanji sequels, Johnson's yet to create a sequel for any of his projects. Even DC's Black Adam had the potential to be The Rock's next big franchise, but unfortunately, it didn't live up to expectations, especially amidst the DC reboot. Now, I'm not saying that Johnson came crawling back to the series because of this setback, but you gotta admit, Hobbs is the biggest character Johnson's ever played, so I wouldn't blame him for wanting to come back to the role for a few more rounds. Besides, his return also means that the film will focus less on Dominic Toretto. It's no secret that Dom's been front and center in recent films, even to the point where it became a bit of a problem. I mean, don't get me wrong, Dom and Brian O'Connor have been the faces of this saga since day one, but lately it's been a little too Dom-heavy, if you catch my drift. No pun intended. With Brian no longer in the picture, it was only natural for Dom to take center stage. But sometimes a little change in perspective is a good thing. And that's where Hobbs comes in. He's such a dynamic and entertaining character that he's not just able to share the spotlight, but can also add some extra spice to the mix. Hobbs is a force to be reckoned with, and has a name big enough to hold its own alongside Dom in Fast X Part 2. But arguably, the biggest part of Johnson's return to the franchise, even more so than the money and the hype, is the fact that it brings the saga to a full circle. In Fast X, the crew's pitted against the most dangerous enemy they've ever faced, Momoa's Dante Reyes. I mean, the film literally opens up with one of the previous villains of the franchise, Charlize Theron's Cypher, showing up at Dom's house half dead after an encounter with Reyes. Dante's the son of none other than Hernan Reyes, the villain from Fast 5. And guess what? He's out for blood, seeking revenge for the death of his old man. And that's exactly what makes Johnson's return so important to the series. Because after all, it was Hobbs who delivered the final blow to Hernan, not Dom. So it would make a whole lot more sense for Dante to be tracking Hobbs down instead of terrorizing Dom and his family. With Johnson's return, Hobbs will be striding back into the picture, ready to face Dante's wrath, all while bringing us back to the very roots of the Fast and Furious saga. Talk about a killer comeback, right? So there you have it, from bringing the whole saga to a full circle to Johnson and Diesel putting an end to their beef. That's how Dwayne Johnson's return to the Fast and Furious franchise changes everything.